if you look back on the previous generations, I think like because we've become more relaxed as far as the stringency and what they correlated to what manhood was. But back in the day, you could earn $1 million, and if you had feminine ways, they would just rap. So it's not like it was always this financial basis that needed to be met. Because if you had a feminine ways, they would say you're. I think the word they use is pansy, and they wouldn't respect that man as a man because he didn't carry himself as a man. So I think it's a lot of other metrics that don't get added into that conversation and its nuance. I know it's a whole different.
Yeah, like you talking about as far as temperament goes. You got it, sis.
Thank you. So I hear what you're saying, Marcus. I think that's due to the way that women have changed, the nature of women, right? I think with the rise of the masculine woman, the more effeminate man has become more acceptable, right?
Mhm.
And I hear this rhetoric a lot of like, men were not expected to be emotionally available, emotionally intelligent in past generations. I don't agree with that, right? I think that like when we look at our grandfather's generation, the majority of them were incredibly emotionally intelligent. They might have been more stoic than what we're used to in our generation, right? Where men were not as expressive about their emotions. But the way that they were able to handle everybody else's emotions and manage their own emotions, I think that that art has been lost. And so we've become, not to say that men expressing their emotions is a negative thing. I don't want to say that. But there's a degree in which it crosses over into feminine behavior. That line is incredibly dotted. So now we have these gaps where we can weave in and out depending on how each individual person defines masculinity. And I think that's where we get into that trouble that you're talking about, where definitions don't look the way that they used to, because now we've created these gaps
Mhm.
to make things acceptable that may not necessarily be natural to people. And I know that's a little
Exactly.
controversial, but I think that's what it is.
But what you just said was point on though. When you said that, see, that's the thing is that whether anybody smacks a definition on there or not, what's going to come to a woman naturally is always going to be there. They're going to be drawn to that out of a man. And when you just mentioned that about the whole thing about these, how the men are right now, that is another thing that is completely right as well. Is that that's why I say I deal with certain age of young men, because you still got a chance to pretty much put them on a different trajectory where they were already going. Because if a lot of us were raised in a single parent home, the only way that we know to respond to certain situations is probably most likely from our mom. And, we act out just like that. So there's this thing that's going on right now where we're working on some young men to get them, and I tell them it's breaking the queen bee or the queen ant or whatever queen insect you want to think of mentality out of young men. Because what will happen is this: they will be ready to buck up against an authoritative masculine man. They don't recognize that. They don't know. They don't understand what's going on if a man is trying to check them. They will buck up, be ready to fight back against a man. But then a woman will come along and they will literally submit to that woman. They will literally fall right in place because they're used to getting that from their mom. It's subconsciously in them, you know. So that's why you find out a lot of them got a certain type of temperament of that certain way. When you talked about the emotionally intelligence, and again, it's not just black men, it's white men as well in certain situations. I call the mentality the same type of mentality that you would find in the hood, the projects in the ghetto. You would find that same mentality amongst white men from the trailer park or the backwoods, or the ones you call hicks. The mentality is all still there the same. So being a man first before becoming a husband and then a father, that's the order it needs to go in. Because if you don't do it in that way, then that's going to be something that you're going to have to fight and deal with within that relationship.
Well, I have a question. It was some I can't remember exactly what Inan said, but it has something along the lines to do with, um, I guess, women changing, and therefore men are becoming more feminine. In terms of that, I think part of that is the shift. I know people identify it with feminism or what have you, but in terms of kind of like going along the lines of what Marcus was saying, as industries changed, I think expectations also changed along with it. So previously, it was only men that were going to work. So it was a set, defined role in which women had to behave or had to move in terms of whatever the social constructs were, right? But as the environment changed in terms of the job market and women being able to, make more money and things like that, I'm not sure if it was necessarily more women becoming more masculine acting, or the societal norms have shifted and put men in position who may not necessarily be able to clearly define what their role is, now that the protection and provision has it means more than just being home, protecting you from, the bears and the robbers, and, the monetary aspect. And so I think that's kind of where we are now. Not to say that the more masculine women doesn't exist, because there are definitely women who are trying to move like men. And in some of those behaviors, to be honest, I don't even think men should have been moving like that anyway. With some of the things that the, women is, oh, I smash as many men as I want. Men get to do it. I don't think men should have been doing that anyway. But, so certain things along those lines, yes, I absolutely do believe that women were moving like that. But I think the other part is just the social norms and shift has changed, because the industrialization of women being put into, the marketplace have shifted now what that means, what protection and provision means. And men are trying to find their way to identify what that looks like now. So that's why I think it's just this big push back to, we need traditional women. And that's because I think that's more along the lines of what they understand, because that's where historically it's been. Whereas I do think you could still be traditional, but that tradition is going to look a little different in this environment.
So I appreciate that. And let me clarify what I meant by that. In order for a woman to remain in her masculinity, kind of to what modern Renaissance man is talking about with the magnets, the only way to maintain that dynamic is to partner up with a man who's more feminine. So the less traditional ideology behind masculinity, right? And if we're really honest, women of color have always worked. Women who look like us have never really, on a grand scale, had the fortune of being women who didn't have the luxury, or who had the luxury of not having to work for a long time. So I don't know that working is really the dynamic of it. I think it's the earning potential that women have that has really shifted.
That.
Yeah, it has really shifted. If women are now the top consumers in homes, if women are now the top consumers in terms of like just general consuming market, right? For the majority of things, obviously there's specific demographics for certain things, but if women are more, women are participating in the economy more, in the absence of men, financial provision now has a very different threshold than it did in the past. And so now the woman who's capable of reaching that, bridging that gap a little bit more, now has to be seeking out a man who's able to create provision in a very different dynamic than what has happened in the past. So that's kind of what I'm talking about with like women becoming more masculine. It's not to say that earning more necessarily means that you're masculine, but it's maintaining the power equals money dynamic in a woman. That's a more masculine trait, right?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't
There are women out there who out earn their husbands, who out earn their significant other, who still reject the notion of that means power. And that's really where this rise of a more effeminate man, this more tolerance towards men that are more effeminate, has really risen, because that number of women who reject that has dwindled from the past. It doesn't exist the way that it is.
Okay, go ahead, Shan.
So, you know, I just had a little thinking. Y'all try to follow me because it's going to be everywhere because it's 2:00 in the morning. So, do you think that women at some point in the 50s and 60s, the reason that they chose to be so ambitious because they envied the life of the, you know, how women, we envy other people's positions. Let's just say you're the help. And you're like, I just want to do anything not to be the help, to be in that woman's position. You understand what I'm saying? So you teach your kids the same thing, and you're kind of upset because maybe you wish your mate will feel the same way. Like, I want him to be so we can get out of this situation, like have the same type of ambition so that we don't have to be that. Does that make sense?
You got it.
I'm thinking from 60s, 70s, you know.
Just for clarification, are you asking if black women were envious of white men?
White women, like, or what they had, like the opportunity. Like,
oh, now I got you.
Well, yeah, their lives seem so much easier. Like when you were in a position and you look at other people, you think their lives are much easier. You may not have any clue of what's going on behind closed doors, but the idea, like I remember.
Real fast before you start, because let me just put this in there. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it this way. You know how when you were younger and you didn't have that much money, but your parents wanted to dress you like you did. They wanted you to go out in the finest because they wanted you to look the part. Even though you didn't have it, they would do anything just so you can look presentable. You can.
Oh, that didn't happen in my life.
Mm-hmm. In that, you know, the psychology behind it all. You understand what I'm saying?
No, we must have been real broke because that never happened in my life. I was wearing light up LA gear. What are we talking about?
We saw the pictures.
What? You had light up LA gears? You was a baller.
Hey, look, that's in a group chat, and I don't share that shit with everybody. You gotta stop it.
Don't share it.
Look, so
see, you trying to play me?
I'm joking, AP. Your parents look like they invested money to make sure you look nice. Be quiet.
No, look. You know that shirt that I had on in that second grade picture? I think I had it in the first grade picture too. We was broke.
Okay, go ahead, y'all.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to hijack. I'm sorry.
No, you good. I was looking for the picture to see if I can
stop it.
But you
know, I never do that.
You know, I think
I know exactly what you're saying, though, Shan. I was saying, I think that with Kanye song when he was talking about, I can't go to the store without a jersey and some ones that's clean and the shirt with a team. It seemed like we're leaving the American dream, but people highest up got the lowest self-esteem. I think that especially for us, and I'm saying other people probably do this as well, but especially for us, we have to wear value or show value in order to feel valued by society, because for us specifically, I've heard people speak about like interaction with the police, and if they were interacting with the police in their neighborhood where they felt comfortable and it was obvious that they come from wealth or whatever, they felt that interaction would be positive. But if they did not have any qualifiers to be able to prove to them that they were a valuable human being, then that discounted their worth in that society. So I think that is in tandem with what you're saying.
I would say maybe the time period might need to be a little different, because actually during that time we were married just as much as the white people were. And actually I think once things started getting going, this is post-slavery into the going into the 1950s into the 60s a little bit, we probably was earning, I would say, I'm just throwing a number out there a little bit, I would try to pull it up, but we weren't too far off from what we were earning, because we had increased like 100-folds in becoming like physicians and pharmacists and people that own certain businesses. But what I think, to me, my opinion, I think what infiltrated is that people might have been having a life that they were good with until somebody came in there and made them feel like they didn't, if you follow me. So what I'm saying that for is that, let's say, for example, if I lived a life of like somebody, I hate to say this way because folks think I'm being bougie or something, but let's just say if I decided, even being a doctor, if I decided to go back and live in a decent hood like type area, a lot of people that stayed, like when we stayed in the hood, I wouldn't say that we knew that we were poor or broke until somebody made us feel like we were poor or broke. Like, all I know is that we ate, to a certain extent, you ate every day, you played, You know, you did everything other kids did until somebody came and was like, dang, y'all poor. It's like, what? Y'all poor? How? Because y'all look, you know, so what I'm saying is that there are some women, especially like some older women that's still living today at some of these HBCUs that we go to, that they were saying things like, we were good, we were comfortable. Somebody came in and made us feel like we should want more, even though we didn't want more. So therefore it made us feel like, well, we don't got the best. And so we went out and tried to get more. I might have butchered that up.
Go ahead, Ina.
So, yeah, so I don't know that it's necessarily like an envy thing, right? I think it's more so, and it's outdated, but like the Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? Like you go from like your basic necessities to your next level until you get into like self-fulfillment. So I think there's like a certain point where you start to look at people who are higher on that hierarchy and start to want to achieve better for yourself. And I think it's interesting because, like, you know, in the past, white women may have been like that standard because they had the quote unquote luxury lifestyle, right? Like they were the kept women, right? But I don't know how much y'all listen to music, but the music in regards to white women in that era was a whole lot of conversations about these housewives popping pills to deal with their depression, their anxiety, their unhappiness in those situations, being a domestic worker, which is what pushed the second and third waves of feminism, right? So I think it's like this whole concept of like the grass is always greener versus like the grass is greener where you water it. I think Black women really had something really special because that in the past, that dynamic between Black women and Black men, that understanding of like, hey, we're really in this together. We're really doing this together. We're fighting for our rights together. We're providing for our families together. We're really working hand in hand together. That's something that other communities don't necessarily have the same experience. And we've disintegrated that with this ideology of like the American dream. That, you know, if we start to compete a little bit more, we can all keep up with the Joneses. We can all get that white picket fence. We can all get that single house. Like we can wear luxury brands. We can go on all these certain trips. And I think that's really deteriorated this idea of like connecting with people as human beings based on their experiences, based on community, based on like the future that we're looking to provide for the next generation.